Okay, so Python crash course, let's start with the absolute basics here. So I'm just going to create a comment using an octothorpe, a hashtag symbol, which is above the 3 on my keyboard. I'm going to say data types. The main ones here are going to be, in fact, I'm going to use also a triple quoted string. So I can have all of these comments in here. Integer. And what is an integer? An integer is a whole number. So that an example of that would be, say, 4, right? Or minus 70. Those are integer values. Then we have real or float. They mean the same thing. A number with a decimal point. So, for example, 3.14. Which is pi, right? Or 1.618, golden ratio. We refer to, Edexcel refers to those as real numbers, so don't get tripped up. You'll hear they'll hear them being called floating decimal points, or real numbers. And a character is another one. Character, or char sometimes, and this is just a single character that can be typed. So that could be it could be hashtag, it could be @ symbol, it could be exclamation mark, those kind of things. String, pretty much anything you type in with quotation marks or in the keyboard is going to be a string. So 0 or more characters in quotes, because you can have an empty string. And Python allows you to have double, like yes, or single quotes. Just be consistent. I tend to use double because you can use the single quotes for apostrophes and other things without interrupting the syntax sometimes. So I tend to use double quotes, but you can use both, but you just have to be consistent. And finally, Boolean values. True or false. Oh, let me spell it right. And that would be the example, capital T, capital F, false. Okay. So those are main data types. Now we can have constants in other programming languages like JavaScript, where we can actually write constant. For example, pi equals 3.14, 1.9, whatever it is. We can do that, but in Python, this constant thing doesn't work, so we just denote it with uppercase. So I'm going to put constants written in uppercase. So any variables which we don't expect to change are going to be constants. And what is a variable? A variable is just a container. So I could have a variable called name. I can initialize a variable called name, and it can be assigned something. So terminology is important in computer science. There's so much jargon. So you can say equals sign is an assignment operator. Okay, the equal sign, it's not an equation, it's not like in math. You're assigning a value. Okay, so name could equal a string. For example, a name. Or it could equal a Boolean value. It could equal any of those data types that we outlined earlier. Let's keep that there as an example. All right. How are variable names named? Right, well, you'll often see something called camel case. So I'm going to write that in there. Camel case is where the first letter is lowercase, but any subsequent words are uppercase. So, for example, cost price equals 13.23, right? Maybe that's a value in pounds and pence. We can have numbers in there, it's possible. But what you cannot have are spaces. You can't have spaces. So they all have to be joined up together. So camel case is often used in JavaScript and other programming languages. You often see it in Python as well, but you don't have to use it. You can also use underscores like this. So either way is fine, but just know that the naming convention camel case is related to having that subsequent letter of the next sort of word in uppercase. Okay, so that covers super basics of programming in terms of what data types can we have, what are constants, some naming conventions for variables, and let's move on into looking at getting some user input. So, getting input might be, let's say we've got a name, but we don't know who the name is. We want to get the name from the user. What we can do is assign it something which the user types in. And we do that by using input, which is this built-in function in Python. All input is accepted as a string data type. Okay, so that's something you would be careful of. So I put quotation marks in here, and then I can type something in for the user. Type in your name here. All right, I'm just going to put a little colon and a space to make it easier to see what's going on. And if I run this, it will say type in your name here. Now I could type my name in here, and that's fine, but it's not really going to do anything meaningful because I'm not actually printing it out anywhere onto the console. But I have stored whatever I typed in into the variable name. That's being stored. And let's say I need cost price, and I'm going to get that from the user too. If I put input, enter a cost price, then this is going to get stored as a string, and prices are usually in numbers because we want to do some arithmetic to them. Maybe we want to add some VAT to them or do something with them. So we need to do something meaningful with that data type. In that case, we probably want to change it to a floating decimal point or an integer. A floating decimal point gives us the ability to have decimal points. So I could do something like this. I could print out name. So this will allow me to see something on the console. This will print it out for me to see on the screen. And then I could have another print statement saying cost price. So this will just give me two questions. Let me just clear the console first, run it. Type in your name here. So that's going to get stored in there, and enter a cost price. 12.56, right? And then it's printed off my name and 12.56. So not particularly useful at this stage. So let's let's use a more useful example here. And before we go on, I should be able I'll put another triple quoted string in here, which allows me to put multiple lines of comments in. You can convert data types. It's possible to return data types. The most common ones, the one we used just now, integer, will convert the string into an integer. But we can convert, say, a decimal point to a string. It is possible to go backwards and forwards to convert numbers into strings. Or you can convert something to a float. I mean, there are some caveats to these sometimes. But let's use a real world example of area of a rectangle. Something simple that allows us to demonstrate our proficiency in making some variables and changing data types and then printing them out with a message. So we need a length. We need two variables to store some information in. And we're going to get input from the user. We're going to ask enter length. Pretty straightforward so far. And we need to make sure that that length is a number. So for simplicity, we're just going to say a whole number. Okay, we're going to use integers, whole numbers. And then we need at least another variable, width, equals integer input and enter width. There we go. So now we're asking the person for, I'm just going to comment these out for the time being because I don't want them to be printed out, because we're working on another example. Length and width. Now we want to print out a value, and that's going to be the area. So in order to say something in English first before we print out any kind of information, I'm going to say area is, or area equals, and then I need to use a comma, and I can do length asterisk times width. So in Python and pretty much all programming languages, you've got the plus, dash for minus, asterisk is times, and forward slash is divide. There are some other ones as well, which you probably don't have on your calculator, which are really useful for solving problems, like 2 forward slashes, which is floor division, which we'll look at in another video, and the percentage sign, which is a modulo operator. Okay, so that returns the remainder of a division. Super useful things, and there are other ones we can do as well, like we saw here, where we can have 2 asterisks for indices to the power of. Lots of things we can do, lots of math operators. So I'll just put that, math operators, some basic ones there. But we're just using as the times one, length times width. So let's just do this. Enter a length, let's say 23 by 18. And our area is 414. So that's successfully got the user input for the two numbers, converted them into integers, and then times them together. Now, what we can do, if we wanted to, is we can do something called concatenation. So I'm just going to type in here, concatenation means to add together strings. Okay, so which is sort of, I think, from the Italian word link, to link together things. So if we want, the length times width is a number right now. These are integers, and then we've got the times our variables together. But what we could do is create a variable called area and have that equal length times width. And inside here, in our print statement, we could get rid of that comma and join together a converted string of our number for area. Area equals 345. And that's not going to be a real number anymore. That 345 is actually a string. It's going to be essentially a piece of English. And sometimes there are advantages for doing that, going back and forth between data types. But concatenation is a really important area, especially for things like names. If you want to join together a first name and a last name, and you want to make sure that there are strings. In fact, let's just do that as one last example. So we could say first name equals input, type in your first name, and I'm just going to copy that because it's going to be very similar for the second name. Surname. I'm going to put family name instead because I think that's better, because, for example, in China, people write their names back to front from how people do it in Western countries, which can be quite challenging if you're going to the bank or something like that. So family name is more verbose. Family name, and then you could say full name equals first name, it remembers your variable, plus family name. And then we can print out full name. Oh, we've still got our program for our area. Type in your first name, Jackie Chan, and then it will print out Jackie Chan. So notice here that it hasn't put a space in there. I mean, intuitively, we would think, oh yeah, we need a space between our name, but it would literally join those two things together. So if we wanted to have the space, we'd have to join a space. We can do that in Python. Some IDEs kind of give you the space. Like Raspberry Pi Editor, some of them give you the space. If I try that again, Jackie Chan, now I've got the space between it, and that is a string. Okay, so full name is its own string. Strings are immutable data types on their own, but you can use them to create other variables and other strings, but you can't directly modify them. There are mutable data types in Python, which we'll look at in another video. But I think that's enough for like a very beginning starting point on input, output, strings, conversions, a bit of concatenation, and data types.